You may have heard the story about Callide Power Station in Queensland this week, which caused an explosion. There was a failure, caused an explosion 3 years ago. It cut off electricity to 500,000 homes. It's run by a Queensland government agency. They commissioned a report into what went wrong, and it came back and essentially said that there were safety issues and there were cost reductions being driven by the state government that led to this explosion that then caused the biggest blackout in Queensland in decades. Joining me now is Keith Pitt, Nationals MP and former Resources Minister. Keith, the state government doesn't seem to think they had anything to do with this, though.
Oh, well, they've said for years there's nothing to see here, it's not their fault. I mean, what a debacle. 500,000 people lost their electricity supply as a result of underinvestment and lack of technical knowledge, according to the allegations that have been reported and the media reports from the technical expert. So effectively what they've said is someone's put a battery charger on that didn't work, and one of the most critical systems in a power station is your protection system and the backup that makes it work. And if I was a betting man, I'd say what's happened is they're not charged, they didn't function, they've had a fault, the generator has turned into a motor, had a huge draw on the network, none of the protection systems went out, it overheated and went bang. And now you've got Mick, the Queensland Labor Minister, saying it's not his fault, he's not responsible. And guess what the solution is, Caleb? Everyone gets $1,000. So the market's shorted by 400 or 500 megawatts, but you all get $1,000 of your own money back to help subsidise the ginormous increase in electricity because this system's not online.
I wish they'd given us $1,000 when the power went out down in South Australia. Remember that? The whole state went out. But surely...
Which time?
Surely De Brenni ought to go. I mean, how can you stand there as Energy Minister with this report that essentially says a government-run agency failed badly here and there were calls from the state government to cut costs that led to all of this? How can he remain in his job?
Well, it's even worse than that. Can you imagine if someone was injured? Someone could have been killed. I mean, there were literally tons of equipment flying around, 20 and 30 metres in the air from the explosion. And Queensland has industrial manslaughter legislation. The board, the CEO, any other number of individuals could have been fronting up for criminal charges. And if this is the direction from the state government, because, you know, they think coal's not necessary, so run down that asset that we own. It's also a joint venture with someone else. So now the taxpayer will probably have to front up with some sort of compensation. There's no doubt about it. Mick should get the flick. And the Labor government, they should hang their heads in shame for what's happened here. It's cost a fortune. It will cost even more, and there could have been an even worse outcome.
Well, while we're talking about coal and those sorts of things, the energy market operator has come out again, and they've said this a few times now, but they've come out again and reiterated exactly how big of a challenge it is to transition away from coal. They're warning again that we'll have to put a rocket under our renewable rollout if we're going to hit net zero by 2050 and if we're going to have enough power online to keep powering the country when all the coal goes offline. It's just not moving fast enough. We know that, but the government seems intent on continuing down the same line it is. I mean, the result we are going to get is blackouts. There's no doubt about it.
And you've also got a shortfall in gas supply in Victoria right now. That'll impact peakers and the ability to cover because there's no wind and there's no sun. What do they expect is going to happen here? So the solution, according to federal Labor, is to speed up the rollout of what's causing the problem. You can't run this country on part-time power. It has already caused a massive increase in the price of electricity for everyday consumers. They just can't afford it. And what's the environmental outcome? Well, you'll get millions of hectares of the Australian countryside cleared and levelled to cover with the black tarmac of solar panels and thousands of wind turbines which last 20 years, and they're ploughing through pristine forests and koala habitat, literally. But apparently that's okay because they're saving the planet from something where China increases their emissions in 1 year by more than Australia's entire contribution. And guess what? Adam Bandt made actually a very good point today, and that is that emissions under this Labor government have increased. So the coalition, they went down. Under Labor, they've gone up.
Oh, geez, it's amazing what can happen under a Labor government, isn't it? And
it's a miracle.
You talk about gas there, and this is the absurd thing about it. So they've got a gas shortage in Victoria, but of all the gas we produce in this country, I think we keep about 2% of it or something for ourselves, and we export the rest of it. I don't know why we are not using this stuff, because even the federal government acknowledges that a major plank of being able to transition to renewable energy is the use of gas. Gas is unquestionably better for the environment than coal is, but no one is using what we have here as an abundant natural resource.
And the other problem, Tanya Plibersek's just approved a project for Senex, which I think is about 60 PJs. That's a lot of gas, but it's in Queensland, where all the other gas is. And where you need it is in Victoria. And the reason they don't have any is because they've had a moratorium on exploration. There is heaps of gas onshore in Victoria. There's even some more in the Bass Strait if you want to develop it. But you can't take gas from Queensland and deliver it to the middle of Melbourne and have it be the same price as if it was produced 100 kilometres away. It is just a nonsense proposition. We should use Australia's resources for the benefit of the Australian people, but you've got federal Labor governments, state Labor governments who are driven by ideology and not reality, and the result will be blackouts and higher power prices. And Chris Bowen, he had half a shot at me in question time today. I think I must be right up his nose, and that's a good thing.
Now, for those who are watching the pictures in the corner of the screen there, wondering where Julian Assange is, I've just been having a look at the flight tracker here, and they've actually overshot Canberra by a little bit, but unfortunately they seem to be coming back. I thought maybe he realised that he had to land in Canberra and he thought, bugger that, I'm not doing that, but they are turning around, so we'll have the pictures of him coming in for you very soon. Keith, I couldn't believe this. I read a story in The Guardian today by their political editor, Karen Middleton. She's suggesting that Peter Dutton didn't mean to change the Coalition's policy on 2030 climate targets, but that he actually misspoke during an interview with The Australian and then just decided he'd go along with it anyway. What do you make of that?
Well, Peter made what's called a personal explanation in the Parliament today, and he said it's just not factual. So the story's incorrect. But we also voted against Labor's crazy targets. What they've put in place for 2030 is completely unachievable. The only way they can get there is they shut down huge swathes of industry, like the aluminium smelters across the country, who are large contributors. And that's a very, very bad outcome. That's literally thousands and thousands of jobs. And look at the flip side of this. So they've brought in 650,000 additional people in 12 months. And what? They won't use electricity and they won't drive a car and they won't drive up emissions. It is just a nonsense argument. We've got to get back to common sense policies that actually help the Australian people, not make life harder for them. And I can't think of a single person in this country that's better off now than they were under the Coalition. And it's the fault of Labor government policies, particularly around energy. They will just keep driving the price up and up and up.
Keith Pitt, thank you so much for your time.